Afro-Latino World. This is Candace coming at you with another interview with another highly esteemed author, highly accomplished author by the name of Toni Ann Johnson. She is a novelist, a screenwriter, and a playwright whose works have appeared on television, whose works have won awards, most recently the Flannery O Connor Award. And so with that, we would like to extend to you a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So one of the reasons we've taken a special interest in your work is because of the perspective you bring. You tend to highlight the lives and experiences of Black women and women of African descent. And for that, we're very appreciative and we're very grateful. So we're, we would like to know even more about the work you have done, the work that you that we could expect to see in the future. But given that our community is Afro-Latino World, so we do highlight the accomplishments of women, and we celebrate the culture of women in Latin America and the rest of the Spanish-speaking world. However, we are in community with women across the diaspora, regardless of where in the world they are, regardless of the languages they speak. We very much consider you a part of this community, and so we just thought it would be really nice for you to share with us where in the diaspora you would represent, what cultural background it is that you represent in the African diaspora.
Okay, well, I identify as African American. Both my parents identified as Black. However, there are complexities within that. So my mother was adopted. Her biological parents her father was a Russian Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, and her mother was from Jamaica. And I was told that her mother was from the Mandeville, Manchester area of Jamaica, but I've done DNA tests, and that takes me to a parish called St. Anne's, I believe. And so I'm really not sure because I've never met my biological grandmother, never even seen a picture of her, but she was definitely Jamaican. That's confirmed. It's just I'm not sure exactly where. And I did not ever know my biological grandfather on that side, so I don't really identify as that, but my DNA says that I have 27% Ashkenazi Jew, so that is a part of who I am. My mother, as I said, identified as Black. She was raised by a Jamaican family, Jamaican immigrants. And my father's mother was from Bermuda. She was biracial. Her father was English and her mother was from Bermuda and was a descendant of slaves, of enslaved people. And we can trace that legacy all the way back to the patriarch of that side of the family. His name was James Jeremy Darrell, and he's quite well known in Bermuda. He was a ship's pilot while he was enslaved. And by that, I mean, he would go out to the ships that were coming into Bermuda and guide them through the reefs because it was very treacherous and difficult, and he had a great talent for that. And because of that talent, he was recommended for manumission, and he was manumitted. And we had a reunion in 2009, and 350 members of our family all over the world came to that, and we were able to see his manumission papers, which was very moving for me because that made it very real, like what our family's beginning was. So that's my father's mother's side. His father's side was from Virginia. And my great grandfather was enslaved and later freed, moved to the Bronx, and was the first man of color to buy property in the Bronx. And that's that's the stories that I know of our family.
That's amazing. And it's amazing to see how your lineage crosses all sorts of different borders, all sorts of different, all sorts of different cultures. I see a bit of, although African-American, there's some West Indian in there. Of course, Ashkenazi Jew, but I would also think that this is also reflective of women who are of African descent, their backgrounds always very diverse. And so yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective with us. And I think it also informs us.
You froze.
Oh, did I? Okay, good thing we're editing this.
Yeah, just for a second, it's okay.
Okay.
It might be on my end. It might be that I froze and it looked like you froze.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine. But what I was saying is, I can see how your heritage could have inspired your very unique perspective in your work.
Oh yes,
right.
And in fact, my first novel was about people all over. So the protagonist was Puerto Rican and Bermudian. Her mother was Bermudian and her father was Puerto Rican. And I dealt with both cultures, more so the Bermudian, because parts of the book take place in Bermuda.
Yes, and this book would be?
This is Remedy for a Broken Angel. That was my first novel.
Yes, okay, Remedy for a Broken Angel.
So it's a mother-daughter story told from both of their perspectives. And the mother is a jazz musician living in the States, but was originally from Bermuda. And what the story she was told was that she was too dark to pass for white, and her family of origin passed. And so she was given away to an aunt who wasn't passing. And that was something that she never quite got over. She remembers the day that she was given away. And that, I think it caused kind of a sort of break in her psyche that she wasn't quite able to overcome. And it affected her relationship with her daughter in the story, who is already named after her mother's mother who gave her away.
Wow, and I could see how that sort of experience could also be reflected in so many other people's backgrounds. There were probably so many of us who have had ancestors who had to make those kinds of decisions. And so for you to bring light to that, I think that's very important for you to bring light to that kind of perspective.
Yeah. I want to digress and just tell you a story about that. So my grandmother had an uncle who left Bermuda. This was in the 1800s. And he left Bermuda and he went to Australia and didn't tell anyone that he had African ancestry. He had a family and told that family that the reason he was dark is because he had Aboriginal ancestry. And then something happened, that family blew up and he went to New Zealand and he had another family, didn't tell that family that he had any African ancestry. He told that family that he was Native American. Years later, I heard from a relative in New Zealand, this was in 2006, who swore we were Native American because that's what his ancestor, that's the story that his ancestor told. I could not convince him. I was like, I knew them. I went there. We are Black. He did not want to believe it. And then that brought all of us together. So that reunion that I told you about in 2009, the relatives from Australia and New Zealand, and a lot of them had no idea what their ancestry was until that time. So that's what happens when families lie. And they don't, when somebody lies and everybody's confused. So for example, one relative who was Australian thought she was Aborigine, and she based her whole art career, she was an artist, she based her whole career on being an artist of Aboriginal descent. She did not have one drop of Aboriginal blood in her, so she had to come out to the art world and let everybody know, and that was so difficult. So, we didn't celebrate our Africanness all the time because obviously because it was very difficult and it was hard to be Black. It was, you couldn't have the same kind of life. And this man tried to have a different kind of life, but it was a sacrifice and left a lot of confused people.
Yeah, I could imagine. But definitely I can see how your writing or your being able to give voice to these things would be the first step towards bringing about healing for that type of for those types of developments that happen in families. So yeah, I think it's very important, and I'm sure it's only the beginning of many other families starting to unearth these skeletons, so to speak.
That was what led me to writing. Like the first
Mhm.
play that I wrote was about my mother's experience. I didn't find out that my mother was adopted and that she was half white until I was 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
I thought we were Black. And my dad's very light, looks like me, but I knew that story, but I didn't know my mom's story. And all my grandparents that I knew were Black. They look Black. So to find out at 18 that I had this other, ancestry that I had no idea of, it was very shocking to me and disturbing. And my mother separated from her birth mother, and that was what led to my first play. I wrote about, how that mother lost her daughter, how she gave up her daughter, how she lost custody. And I fictionalized it a lot, but the family stories have definitely inspired me to write. And then the book that I just showed you, that also has some of our family background in it. And it is, you're right, healing is the right word. It's always about that. I'm always sort of trying to write to that place.
So I didn't even think of this question. Just as you're talking, I have this question. Do you think then that the inspiration of your writing came from a desire on your part to heal those kinds of generational wounds within your own family, or were you also thinking about how this could help heal the same types of wounds that could be existing in a lot of other Black families?
I think I had a sense that what rippled through my family probably rippled through other families, even if I didn't know that. It's just that there's so many stories of separation. As African Americans, our stories are stories of separation, because when we were separated from each other during the period of slavery. So there's always been separation, and I guess I feel that a lot of us feel a longing for connection. Like we see somebody who looks like maybe we're of the same tribe, and we're curious about them, and we connect. And I also feel, as an African American, a sense of connection to all African Americans. So when something happens to one of us that's big in the news, it's like it's happening to family. And so I think I had that sense of awareness when I was a young writer starting to write, but I could only write what I had access to, what I was really aware of. Not that I wasn't capable of doing research, but my emotional connection was to what happened directly in my own family. And I hope that in writing that, I was communicating something that could be shared with other people and other families, and other people could see themselves in what was going on with these characters, with my characters.
Amazing, amazing, and fascinating. Thank you very much. I am now going to have to go back to the question that we typically like to ask, because I wish I could go on and on down that vein, but I have to. We ask this question of everybody, and that is simply because again, this is a community that wants to highlight our African heritage and the African tradition and tendency of emphasizing ancestors. So what we would like to know from you is who are your ancestors in literature? Who are the people who have inspired you, who have come before you, alive or not, who have inspired you as a writer to do what you're doing?
The ancestor that always comes to mind when I think about this is James Baldwin. James Baldwin was one of the first writers that I found one of his books and then wanted to read everything that he had written. So I did read quite a few of his novels when I was very young, like under college and before. There are playwrights who I also see as my aunts. August Wilson, although August Wilson's plays didn't come out until I was an adult. So I think the first August Wilson play I saw was probably around 1985. But I've since, seen almost all the plays. I've
Mhm,
read
mhm,
most of the plays. His language, I don't think my writing's anything like August Wilson, but
mhm,
the musicality in his language is inspiring to me, as is the musicality in the language of Tennessee Williams, another
mhm,
playwright. And I
mhm,
studied playwriting as a young writer, so playwrights were very influential in my work. Toni
mhm,
Morrison was somebody I read a lot, but I always come back to James Baldwin.
mhm,
And I've during lockdown, I had a subscription to Libby, which is an app on my phone where you can listen to audiobooks for free. And
mhm.
I listened to every single book available by James Baldwin, fiction and nonfiction. And I just feel like if I had like a literary dad,
Mhm,
it would be James Baldwin. I can't even express like how deeply I admire him as a thinker and as a
mhm,
writer, his
mhm,
generosity of spirit, like how he was able to love people so
mhm,
much that
mhm,
he could write
mhm.
about all kinds of people with empathy. And there are a lot of writers who are respected and revered, but don't write about all people with
Yep,
empathy. And
yep.
he is one. So that is very meaningful to me. And I feel like I've benefited from being able to read all of his work. At least as much. There's one book I still haven't read that's on my Kindle,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
most of them I've been able to read.
Well, one thing that I can definitely see as a legacy from him to you is courage, courage in writing,
Mhm,
and really just having the passion of speaking about our experiences, and
mhm,
really not trying to varnish them or whitewash
yeah.
them, and really just speaking truth to power. I think that's something that I've noticed in
His
common between you and him.
authenticity, he
Yes.
was, you're right, he was courageous, and he wasn't afraid to write about being a gay man during a time when everybody wasn't quite comfortable with that.
Mhm,
He was
mhm,
authentically himself, and I think that made him a really great writer. And I think that was healing for me because, as I told you, I wasn't told that my mom was adopted until I was an adult.
mhm,
While I was being raised, there was a part of my mother that wasn't accessible to me. She wasn't showing up in my life as a parent with her entire self. She
mhm,
wasn't being authentic. And though I wasn't conscious of that, I think I knew that something was missing.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I do think that that was instrumental in wanting to write and wanting to excavate truth and understanding things and understanding people. Like I couldn't
mhm,
make sense of her.
mhm,
And I had a drive to understand people. Also, my dad was a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and so that was
mhm,
his business.
mhm,
That was the work that he did,
mhm,
always trying to understand people. And I wasn't trained as a psychologist, but just conversations that having with my father, like trying to understand things. And
mhm,
unfortunately, I wasn't curious enough about him. There's a lot now that I would ask him. He's deceased. That I didn't ask. I
mhm.
didn't ask those questions because unfortunately, when you're a kid, you're not always that curious about you know
Uh-huh.
when you get
Mhm.
older, you're curious about history, but when you're a kid, you're sort of interested in the now.
Yeah.
But that did drive me. There's just authenticity, really, really getting to who is this person? What
Mhm,
are they
mhm,
about? What are they thinking? Who are they really? How do they really feel? Like
mhm,
those are
mhm,
questions I think I'm always digging at in my
mhm,
work.
mhm. Which is which is something that you could say can link you to your own biological father. Both of you share, I would say, a curiosity in human behavior,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
As a psychologist, that's what he
Mhm.
did, and as a writer, that's also what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
Sharing a curiosity in that way. So let me see, what do I have here? Yes, okay. So yeah, in that vein, you know, with all that you've written, um, you know, what we would like to know is like as an accumulation of all that you've written, what is it that you would like the world to know about Black women, women of African descent, and what is it that you would like us, Black women, women of African descent, to know about ourselves through your work?
That's an interesting question. I can't say that I think there's one thing that I could distill it down to, but I feel like we've been dehumanized in the culture for so long that and dismissed. I think we should know that we are complicated human beings with all the feelings, experiences. We are as worthy as anybody, though I think the culture has tried to make us feel like we aren't as attractive, we aren't as smart, we aren't as interesting, we aren't as complicated, or we're so strong we don't have feelings, we're impervious to pain. There's a lot of lies that the culture has tried to tell Black women about themselves, and I guess I would want Black women to know that all the bad things that we've heard, they're not true. That we are human beings. We're human. We have the full range of human experience, like all women of all cultures. So I don't know. That may not be the most interesting answer, but I think Black women also, because there has been so much that has been against us, we've kind of developed to be, to have to be smarter, work harder, try harder. And certainly, you know, we're not a monolith, so that's not true of every single woman, but most Black women, when they're at a level of achievement, they are the greatest. Like, I mean, I think of this over, like you can't get to a place of respect and success without being super spectacular at what you do. Like Ketanji Jackson, for example.
Exactly.
You know, like she like, they tried to trip her up. They can't.
They really can't.
Smarter than everybody that questioned her because she had to be.
Yeah, she was eminently qualified. I remember seeing some sort of graphic that they have about certain qualifications, certain aspects of qualifications, and they have her lined up with the rest of those who are already on the bench, and she's checking every single one, every single one, and none of them could do that, right? So yeah, definitely, it shows in all aspects of society. So yeah, given all of that, and also that, you know, clearly in our community as well, there are creative people too. There are people who are aspiring writers as well. Are there any pearls of wisdom that you could share with anyone who wishes to bring perspective to literature in the same way that you have? Is there any advice that you could give to anyone who is looking to be a writer, to be a playwright, a screenwriter? Is there anything you can share with us about your journey as a writer?
Well, that's two separate things, but the first, to aspiring people, I would say that a lot of people will try to dismiss you and tell you that you're not talented, that your voice is not wanted, that there's no place for you. These are all things that I heard. And I think you have to tune all that out and trust, if you feel that you're a writer and you have something to say, you just go ahead and do it, and just do your work. Don't listen to naysayers. Don't give up. Just keep doing your work. Write thing after thing after thing. Sometimes you'll succeed and you'll get your work accepted. Keep sending it out. But if I could go back and tell myself, I would say just develop as much confidence as you can when you're young, with humility. I mean, don't come out of the gate thinking I'm the greatest writer there is, because no, you're not. If you're starting out, you have a lot to learn, and you have to practice, and you have to get better. But it's going to be easier for you to practice and get better if you're not listening to voices that are telling you that you're no good, that no one cares what you have to say, that your perspective is not valid. Yes, it is. So if you're a human being in this culture, your perspective is valid as anybody else's is. So just keep writing, tune people out that aren't supportive, find people who are supportive, find a community, find a literary community. If you don't have a spouse or a parent who's there to have your back and support you, make friends with other writers and form a collective, have a group and support each other. And don't be jealous of one person who ascends faster or higher than the rest of you, because in the long arc of a career over a period of decades, everybody will get those breaks if they hang in there. But you have to hang in there. You can't write one thing, get a bad critique or a bad review, and then go, pull the covers over your head and not work anymore. You just have to keep going. There's going to be years when nothing great happens, and then years when all the blessings happen. And that is just how a career goes. You're up sometimes, you're down sometimes, but don't let the times when it's discouraging, don't let that keep you down. Keep writing. If you want to be an artist, you have to do your art, and you have to keep doing it, and you have to read. You have to read widely and be take what you can from all kinds of places and learn and grow and get better, and just keep doing it. As far as my journey, was there something specific you wanted to know about my journey, or just how did I stay in it?
Yeah, how did you start? Did you have to go to school first? How did the whole thing start?
My journey was not like most writers. I don't think, like some, but not like most, because most writers are not performers. I started out as an actor, and I look like this. So casting directors would kind of be confused by like, well, you don't look Black enough to play the Black roles, but you're not white. So they didn't know what to do with me. So I wrote stuff for myself to act in. And that was what broke me into the business as a writer. So one of the first plays that I wrote was about a woman who's biracial. I don't identify as biracial, but I look biracial. I understand some of it because there's biracial people in my family. I get it. So I wrote about something about that experience, and that got me noticed as an actor, got me noticed as a writer. That it was a play, and that play got me signed to a literary agent who did represented screenwriters. And so that broke me into the business as a screenwriter. And from screenwriting, I became interested in writing fiction because I worked for 10 years as a screenwriter, writing other people's stuff, executing other people's ideas. And I felt like I was being told how to write. I was being told how to craft my voice to fit other people's needs. And I didn't like that. I wanted to go back to playwriting, but I wasn't really interested in going back to school to study playwriting because I had done that. And so I decided to get an MFA in fiction. I'd written a novel, very, very arrogantly thought I could write a novel without ever studying fiction, wrote a novel, didn't sell it. I was like, I guess I have something to learn. So I went back and got an MFA, and I rewrote that novel, and I did sell it. But I had to just learn the craft of fiction. And now I'm really, really loving fiction. I love writing fiction. I feel like I can do everything within that. And I love reading my own work. So as somebody who started out as an actor, I am very comfortable performing my work. And I even sometimes when I'm writing it, I'm reading it out loud. So I anticipate that I'm going to be reading this out loud. And so I make sure that it sounds good. And in fact, I have an announcement. I just found out yesterday that I won the the Miller Audio Prize, which is from the Missouri Review. And the contest was like, you have a piece of fiction and you read it, you record it, and then send it into the contest. And so I read one of my stories just by myself in my closet in this room, and I sent it in, and like, 6 months later, I won. So
wow.
I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's very validating.
Yeah.
I've done the audiobooks for both of my previous novels, and I have a new book coming out, and I hope that I'm going to be able to do the audiobook, or at least be one of the readers. It's a collection of stories.
Yes.
So I know I might
if you
not get
could
to
share
read all
with us, if you could share with us those audiobooks. I know you just mentioned it. You have 2 audiobooks, but if you could also give us the names of these books.
Okay.
So yes, you were talking about the 2 audiobooks.
Yeah, both of these are available on Audible.
Okay, good. So Remedy for a Broken Heart and
Broken Angel.
I'm
Remedy
sorry.
for a Broken Angel. It probably looks backwards. I'm sorry. You can't actually see it. It's hard to, it looks backwards on the screen. But it's Homegoing and Remedy for a Broken Angel. And they're both available on Kindle, paperback, and on Audible.
Okay. And you were about to talk to us about the new book that you have coming out.
So my new book was the book that won the Flannery O Connor Award for short fiction, and that's a collection of autobiographical short stories. And that too was a contest. And this is a longer story, but I was working with an agent for 5 years developing this huge book. It ended up being like 500 pages. And she did not want to sell my work as a story collection. So she asked me to fill in all these different points of view and turn it into a novel. And I had my reservations about this, but I wanted to make some money and I wanted to sell a big book. And so I did everything she said, draft after draft after draft, for 5 years. The book went out in January. It was the agent's version of the book. It was nearly 500 pages, and every last editor passed on this book. Whoa. After 5 years of where I had put my heart and soul into this book, like hoping this was going to do something for my career, for my life, that people were going to read it. And it didn't work. It just didn't work. It was too much. It wasn't a novel. It was a story collection. So I saw that the Flannery O Connor Award was coming up, and it was being judged by Roxane Gay. And I did not think that I had any of winning this contest, because I wasn't sure like even how to put the book together, but I pulled out half of what was in the book because there was a 75,000 word lit. So I pulled out half of it and I put the book together and I sent it in and I won.
Wow.
And so that win came with publication. So the book is forthcoming, and Roxane Gay was my editor, and it comes out in October 15th.
October of this year.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So let that be a lesson to people. Don't give up. It didn't sell, in one form, and I, reconfigured it and tried again, and it sold in another.
Well, that's great to hear, and we really can't wait until we can have access to this book, to these works.
Let me say the title, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
The title of that book is Light Skin Gone to Waste, and you can find the cover if you look for it. It's me on the cover, even though it's written as fiction. The publisher had asked me for some, images or ideas, and so they used a picture of me, and I love the cover. I'm so happy with it. I didn't design it, but I thought they did a lovely job with the colors. It looks like the 70s. Yeah, it's really pretty.
Is there anything that you're able to share with us about why you chose that name for the collection of
title? Yeah, I had heard the phrase and it always stuck in my mind. I thought that the phrase was offensive and funny and sad. I just thought there was so much woven into the idea behind somebody saying light skin gone to waste. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say to somebody. But when I was a kid, I had long hair for the first like 12 years of my life, and I grew up in an all white area.
Mhm.
And I tried to look like the white girls that I was growing up around. And at a certain point, I just said, F it. And I gave up, and I had all my hair cut off, and I had an afro.
Mhm.
And that was something that came up, was that, oh, like basically you ruined your light skin, long haired look. So it's light skin gone to waste. And so I just kind of always remembered that. But it refers to that in the book specifically, but it's also about our family, our light-skinned family, sort of moving into this all-white world, and what do they lose? What do the parents lose when they leave their community to what they think is going to be better, a better place to live, and better socializing, better opportunities, but there's a cost to that. And so I wouldn't say that my parents would have felt like that was a waste, but from my perspective, as a person who didn't grow up around a community of anyone who looked like me except for them, I don't actually happen to think that it was better. I think that there was something lost in that aspiration. But they can disagree. Everybody has their, their own thoughts. I now live in South Los Angeles, which is an African American and Latinx community, and I'm good here. I feel like this is home. And I've lived in white community. I lived in Beverly Hills for 11 years, and I've lived here for a long time. And my parents fled a Black community, and I came to one and made my place here, made my home here.
I kind of caught that it was kind of a lampooning of white supremacy, a lampooning of colorism. I've heard not those exact words, but that sentiment. I've heard that sentiment before, and so I just wanted to like make sure that it was clear that's what I understood what it meant to be.
So if you get a chance to read the book, you'll see, if you think about what that says, I think that thematically that idea plays in and out of the book.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably cut this part out of the interview, because if this interview is about you, not about me. But I wanted to say that I grew up, I was born in Montreal. Which is at the time, well, it still is. I know what it's like to grow up in all white spaces. Just because they're speaking French doesn't mean they don't have a French word for the N-word, right? So it might sound pretty, but it's the same thing. So yeah, I do understand.
I am, because I experienced it too. I heard that word so much. Like people are shocked now. Like people are shocked if they hear that. I really think I heard that word probably like at least 3 times a week throughout my entire childhood.
Yep.
And you think you would get inured to it, or like wouldn't, but it hurt me. Like I didn't like being singled out. It was painful. So I'm sorry that you had that experience. Because
well,
it's so cruel.
It is cruel, it's ridiculous, but I think I'm only assuming, but that perhaps like you, I had refuge in my own family, the people who looked like me, right? To be able to regroup and really just regain that energy. I know that a lot of other Black people in similar situations might not have that kind of refuge, and they're just constantly bombarded with these kinds of microaggressions and stuff like that. So
I didn't, because we didn't have, there was no family near us. Like they visited once in a while, like once a year, and I visited cousins, but I didn't have that refuge. And my father, in fact, was constantly cheating on my mother with white women. And so that was an additional kind of bash to my psyche and my ego, because I just kept seeing Black women, nobody wants us, you know. And my mother was gorgeous. My mother was stunning. But my father kept, you know, favoring white women, and it was more complicated than looks, certainly. But when you're a child, you sort of see what you see. And I see, oh, my father likes this skinny white woman with no butt and really long silky hair. That we don't look anything like that, but that's what he's chosen over our family.
Yeah, I could.
But there wasn't
cut this out too. I'll cut this out too, because it was my grandparents who came to this country. They came from Trinidad, right? And they were mixed race as well. So you know, it was a lot of go back to Hawaii for us. These people didn't even know where we were from. They read us and they couldn't fully understand. But yeah, a lot of stuff. But yeah, my grandfather, he cheated on my grandmother with the white woman, and it completely devastated her too. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Please don't cut it out, because this is interesting that this is I mean, I'm just as interested in your experience. And I, you know, these are
a lot of parallels. That's all.
These are our stories, and to acknowledge, you know, how our own families can hurt us when they choose something that, you know, tells us that we're not enough. Like we have to constantly like reaffirm our worth and our value. And if you don't have if you can't in your own family like feel validated in your own family, and then you go to school and people are telling you your butt is too big, you're dark. It is very difficult to grow up in that circumstance, and that was my life. And I'm fine now, but I was not fine for a long time, and I did not want to be myself. And that, I guess that's why I write, you know, like, so that's a good thing that came out of it. I became a writer, but it was a really hard life emotionally and psychologically to be in that space.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I mean, no, well, I know exactly. I actually know exactly what that is, right?
Yeah, so please keep your story in there too.
Well, the thing is, Toni Ann, my grandfather, he passed away last year, and so there's I think there's still a lot of complicated grieving going on within my family for him, because I think a large part of it had to do with that. My grandmother actually had a nervous breakdown after she discovered this sort of thing. If you could imagine being an immigrant, right? Not really, and being isolated in this part of Montreal, nobody from your cultural community is around, you're by yourself, and your husband abandons you as well for another woman who looks like the people that your culture idolizes.
Yes, that's exactly, right? Very similar.
It really hit her hard. She had her breakdown. It affected, like they had 5 daughters, my mother being one of them. It affected their upbringing. And when he passed away, it brought up a lot of complicated feelings about his death, because on the one hand, you're grieving, but on the other hand, you're still very angry about what he did. And there's this, so that's why, and given that it hasn't been a year yet, I don't want them to lynch me.
Well, don't tell them about the interview. Just don't share it with them. But it affects you too. If it affected your mother, it affects you too. It affects your whole family. It ripples, you know, and like there's messaging that your mother got from that, and hopefully she didn't pass that on to you, but it got passed on to me, and I wanted, you know, I felt like, oh, I guess I should try to look more white. I should like straighten my hair more and diet my ass off, and like, you know, try to be what is that what attractive is? And it makes me so angry now. It makes me so angry. And my mother was so angry, and she didn't have the capacity to really work on her anger outside of our home. And so she took it out on me. So I got the brunt of her anger, and it was violent and abusive. And together. You know, it's all tied together. Like somebody wounds, like, you know, a parent's psyche, and then it like comes onto the child, and it's hard. It was just horrible. But I wrote about all that stuff, and you know, my dad, he's fortunate that I guess that he's not alive to actually have to deal with the fact that I'm putting this out into the world. But this is what happened. This is what happened, and these are our stories. Like white supremacy does a number on Black people too, even within their homes, within, you know, within their desires, you know, during certain times in history. I hope that's not still true now, but you know, we're talking like the 60s and the 70s, you know, Black women weren't as beloved as I hope they are now. We didn't have Beyonce in 90s. We had Donna Summer, and I loved Donna Summer, but you know, my dad and his generation were, you know, loving on white women and how pretty Farrah Fawcett was. Yeah. You know, not us.
Definitely that's something that you're exposing, which is, a lot of our social conditioning and how whitewashed it could have been. It wasn't just with Americans. It happened in the Caribbean as well, and in Latin America. This is, you know, colorism is something that we are really starting to talk about right now within our cultures and stuff. So it's great that that we now have the courage to be able to talk about these things, because as you said, it brings about healing and stuff. So I thank you very much for sharing with us today.
Thank you too.
We really look forward to seeing more from you. I'm actually thinking, because I'm starting up a bookstagram. And
please put my book on it. I would love that.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking if you you do readings, we could probably arrange sometime where with Afro-Latino World we could have some sort of an event where you can share with us some of your readings and stuff like that.
But I
believe that would conclude the interview.
Okay.
If you could just show us again your books. Okay. Yeah.
And also, I don't know if you can see this, but if you could see that Ruby Bridges poster in the background, that's also my movie. I wrote that movie, so I'd love for your fans to check that out as well if they haven't seen it. But these are the books.
So
this one is Homegoing. And Remedy for a Broken Angel.
And Homegoing. All right. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.